right, everyone. Welcome to Money Lion MMA UFC Vegas 54. This will be our third episode. We're looking at some pretty big fights happening this Saturday. Of course, as always, I'm here with Jose. We've got a good card coming up um, with Blachowicz and Rakic being the headliner. After the main event, we've got Ryan Spann versus young Cutelaba. Then we've got Davey Grant against Louis Smolka. We've got Katlyn Chookagian against Amanda Ribas. I mean, these are four pretty heater fights coming in for a fight night event. Franck Camacho versus Manuel Torres and Jake Hadley versus Nascimento finishes out the main card. The prelims will not be discussed, at least by us, but there are some heaters for those prelims as well.
All right, Nick, and that brings us to our first fight of the night, our feature flyweight bout: Jake Hadley versus Nascimento. Hadley is making his long-awaited official UFC debut, and he's taking on Nascimento. And Nascimento was originally he's kind of a replacement. Jake Hadley was actually originally supposed to face Francisco Figueiredo earlier in March, back in London, but Hadley had to withdraw due to an injury. And in comes Nascimento. This is a fight that I'm extremely excited about. Seeing Jake Hadley make his UFC debut. Heard a lot of great things about him. Seeing him come off the Dana White's Contender Series was great. He is the betting favorite right now. He's the minus 215, while Nascimento is the plus 172 underdog.
Yeah, Jose, I'm really excited to see this fight lead off the main card. I think that would have been awesome to see that Jake Hadley versus Francisco Figueiredo fight. Now having known with the hindsight that Figueiredo got that quick submission win in the replacement fight that he had, I believe it was last month. So that would have been really cool to see because Jake Hadley, the White Kong, does like to get out on the ground and get a little dirty himself. So I think that could have been a fascinating fight. But that's not to say that Hadley still doesn't have a respectful stand game as well. In his one Contender Series match against Raposo, he was still out striking him before he went into that one takedown attempt, got the takedown, and did two submission attempts in the course of a minute and a half to get the rear naked choke and secure the win. I think that's one of the more impressive quick takedown into submissions that I've seen. It's fascinating to me that he had a 3.7 submission average in 3 rounds. So he's definitely not getting to the ground just for ground control. He's looking to immediately jump into as many submissions as possible. And I think he's just going to kind of slowly choke out Nascimento, just in the sense that he's going to grind him down. He won't necessarily go for the takedowns right away, but he's going to use his stand-up game to kind of soften up Nascimento into the ground game. Nascimento is the 16% takedown offense in his two fights, one of them being a Contender Series fight and the other being an undercard fight on UFC 267. Nascimento has not shown the ability to defend himself on the ground whatsoever. So I think Hadley's going to be able to kind of decide whether this fight stays on the ground or whether it stays standing. Wherever Hadley's more comfortable, I think, is where it will stay.
Yeah, Nick, that's a great point. Hadley does have phenomenal jiu-jitsu. I will want to mention that Nascimento, though hasn't shown it much in the UFC, he has phenomenal jiu-jitsu himself. He does have a few rear naked chokes racked up in his MMA record in there. And not to mention, man, this guy can't. Nascimento doesn't seem to catch any luck. His last 3 losses have all come through split decision. So even his UFC debut, he had a close call with Tiger Olimbekov. He was able to make it all 3 rounds and lose by split. And same thing when he went against Roland Pavaya. He lost back in 2018 via split decision, and then again in 2016. But in between, he's had wins, but a lot of canceled bouts. And this one against Jake Hadley, I do not think he's going to be that worried about the submission attempts from Hadley. I think he's going to be well versed. He's well versed in jiu-jitsu himself, that he may just feel comfortable and defend, even if Hadley has the upper hand and is on top of him. I do think that he is going to push Hadley a little more, where, you know what, I can even see Hadley going by a win like TKO. I do think that Nascimento may bring that out in him where he's not going to be able to finish him via submission. So I do think that Hadley will take the win on this one, and I think he will take it almost via ground and pound.
Love that prediction, Jose. To be honest, I think those are some great points. Nascimento hasn't lost any other way but then by decision, and multiple of those, like you mentioned, have been split decisions. So definitely hasn't been getting any breaks from the judges by any means in his UFC run so far, but I honestly don't think he's going to be catching many more breaks against Jake Hadley here. I think the UFC did not do Nascimento any favors matchup wise here. I agree that Nascimento may not be too concerned about the submission attempts if he does have that great jiu-jitsu background, but regardless, I'm still pretty convinced that Hadley will be able to soften him up and win that decision if needed on the ground, or excuse me, standing up. So I'm not quite, I'm not confident enough to say that Hadley is going to win and be the first to submit or knock out Nascimento, but I am going to pretty confidently pick Hadley for this fight.
And well, I think that wraps it up for this fight. The first fight of the night, the feature flyweight bout. Both Nick and I, we got Jake Hadley.
All right, and we got our second to last fight on this card, UFC Vegas 54. Frank Camacho versus Manuel Torres. Frank Camacho coming in at a plus 110 underdog. Torres, one of the crazy guys coming in off his UFC debut in the Contender Series. Well, I guess maybe not officially a UFC fight, but regardless, a Contender Series fight. He's coming in at a minus 134 favorite. This is an interesting matchup because I think Frank the Crank is a tough, tough battle. He's got a crazy volume that he's been showing against multiple UFC fighters, but he has had a tough past being submitted by Beneil Dariush, and the couple wins he has gotten, just he got the split decision win against Damian Brown, so it just wasn't quite as significant. And another win against Nick Hain, which was a TKO in round two at the very end. So it's good that he's got a TKO under his belt, but otherwise he just hasn't been impressive enough against a lot of the UFC talent he's seen. Also matching up against Drew Dober and going to decision, which is pretty impressive, but in the end it was a unanimous decision loss for Camacho. So we'll see how that impacts this fight. Torres is coming off of his, as I mentioned previously, his Contender Series debut against Colton Anglin. Got the TKO early in round one, so it's hard to get the judge exactly on where Torres is at. He's got some previous experience, but not quite in as many of the respected areas like Bellator and stuff like that. So we'll see how that experience in some of the Mexican and more underground fight scenes can translate into the UFC as he fights some of the more tough fighters.
Yeah, Nick, this is a fight that I'm extremely excited to see Manuel Torres make his official UFC debut. He has shown a lot. He's shown some diversity, but strong grappling. He does have multiple submission wins via guillotine, rear naked choke. And he's also shown that he has the hands. He has has some TKOs, ground and pound as well. He has strong wrestling. He can defend a takedown, so I'm not think he's too worried about Camacho trying to bring it anywhere to the ground anytime soon. And yeah, I'm really excited to see Torres's UFC debut. I find it interesting that they're pairing him up with someone already with some UFC experience, but he hasn't won a lot of those fights. That he's come up short a lot, like you mentioned against Drew Dober. He's also come up short against Jeff Neal, and like you mentioned, he got rear naked choked by Beneil Dariush. So he has not had the most pleasant UFC matches. That's to say, he has had tough competition. So I don't want to like let his losses and his record really deter what he brings to the table. He is going to be a tough matchup for Torres for a UFC debut. That is, I'm surprised they didn't pair him up with someone with similar UFC experience, but that just shows what the UFC thinks of him in high regards.
Without a doubt, man. I think Camacho's really hard to knock out, and he's going to be continuing to press forward on Torres, and I'm not sure Torres is going to be ready for that kind of pressure. I think Camacho's going to take a lot of shots and not really get phased as much as Torres might be used to some of the guys he's fought in the past. So we'll see if Torres is able to adjust and continue putting on the pressure back to Camacho, even if his opponent is stepping forward. There's some other dynamics that are interesting about this fight. Camacho's been kind of struggling to get back on the mat. He had COVID and had a canceled bout in 2020 against Brock Weaver, and then followed that up. He was on the card for UFC 264, I believe it was, and he ended up unfortunately getting into a car crash, and he had to cancel that bout as well. So it's been quite some time since he's been able to get in the ring, which would have been 2020 in June when he lost to Justin James. So I think it's going to be a really tough comeback for Frank Camacho. He's definitely a ridiculously tough man, and I think he's going to come in there and give it his all. I'm just not sure how well he's going to be able to come back off missing so much time, and also having to go through that unfortunate recovery from his car crash, because from what I saw, it was some relatively significant injuries that put him in the hospital.
Yes, that being said, I personally would go with this matchup, Manuel Torres. He is a new up and coming prospect. I'm excited. I love the fight atmosphere that's building up in Mexico. A lot of great fighters are coming out of Mexico right now. So who knows? We may have a potential champ here, and it'd be excited to see him make his official UFC debut this Saturday. So that being said, I am going to take Manuel Torres via I'm gonna take him via decision win.
Sounds good to me. I'm going to go a little out on the limb and say that Manuel Torres gets the knockout on Camacho. I don't think it's coming early in the fight. Maybe middle of round two, middle of round three. But I do think Torres, he's a crazy. I mean, his nickname is El Loco. He is the crazy one, and I do expect him to throw some crazy stuff out there and potentially get a knockout on Camacho.
And Nick, that brings us over to our feature women's flyweight bout between Katlyn Chookagian and Amanda Ribas. Right now, Katlyn Chookagian is the betting favorite at minus 162, and Amanda Ribas is the underdog at plus 132. Katlyn Chookagian is coming back off a three-fight win streak, her most recent win coming to Jennifer Maia back at UFC Vegas 46 earlier this year in January. That was the last fight of her UFC contract. She hit the free agent market for a short bit, but she didn't last long there. The UFC re-signed her right away. And Amanda Ribas, she's actually making a way up to flyweight again. She has fought at flyweight before in the past. She was originally scheduled to fight Michelle Watterson at UFC Columbus earlier this year. Michelle Watterson pulled out due to an injury, leaving Amanda with no opponent. And then she got the opportunity to get Katlyn Chookagian, a former title contender. So she decided to strap up the boots and move up to flyweight and take on this bout against the number one ranked Katlyn Chookagian.
Yeah, great intro there for this fight, Jose. I think any person that's a good fan of watching fights is excited for this. Chukagian is I would almost like to call her a legend of, female MMA. She's been around for quite a long time, and she's fought pretty much everybody that's relevant in this side of the UFC, from Lauren Murphy to both Shevchenko sisters, Jennifer Maya, Jessica I. The list just keeps going. Jessica Andrade. So we've really seen exactly what Katlyn Chookagian is capable of, and to be honest, she's mostly capable of winning by decision for most of those fights. And the other side of this being Amanda Ribas' side of things, she's 11-2. Like you said, she's actually moving up to the weight class to flyweight, so this will be interesting with that regard. But I think this is a fight that she deserves in terms of a step up in competition. She has still seen some big names, such as Paige Van Zant and Mackenzie Dern, who she's able to beat, and Marina Rodriguez, who beat her in round two. So, I've been pretty impressed with Amanda Ribas' run. She's been able to put together a pretty impressive resume in the UFC with only one loss up to this point. And I think either way, the UFC matchmakers did a great job with this fight.
Yeah, I agree. And when it comes to title contention, I'm not sure if this is a title contention match for any of these two. Even on Katlyn Chookagian, even though this will be her fourth fight if she were to win, fourth fight in a row. I don't know if Amanda Ribas is a title eliminator, challenger eliminator contender match, I guess to say. this is just one where I think it's almost like Amanda Ribas is getting put up to a challenge and, being, that new young up and coming fighter, facing a real challenge. Katlyn Chookagian, she's kind of in a position, kind of reminds me of Yoel Romero, just one of those fighters, maybe Stephen Thompson. They're really good and they've gone a chance to challenge for the title, but they just weren't able to beat the champion because they're that dominant. And what do you do when you're Katlyn Chookagian? You're in a division where you're clearly the best and you stand out against all other fighters, but you just can't win the title. And then Amanda Ribas being ranked number 9, that just kind of surprised me. Katlyn Chookagian has cleared out a lot of her division, and I would have expected, actually, I would have been more interested to see some rematches. I think that though she is really good, and no disrespect to Amanda Ribas, I do believe she can get a win over Katlyn Chookagian. I will have to lean Katlyn Chookagian as taking the win for this one. She is the favorite. She is a minus 162 favorite, and I honestly think it is going to be a unanimous decision. I honestly think she's going to do what she needs to do. She's been able to write out her game plan against fighters more experienced than Amanda Ribas. And that being said, I truly believe she's going to use her 5'9" height advantage over Amanda Ribas' 5'4" height. I think that height advantage, not to mention the 42-inch leg reach and the 68-inch reach she has over Amanda Ribas' 37-inch leg reach and 66-inch reach. Katlyn Chookagian overall is a very athletic woman and just tall and lengthy, and she knows how to rack up those points through her striking, And if you're ever wondering when she's getting points, you should just listen to her when she fights. Every time you hear her do like a shout that she's landing those shots. The way she fights, I kind of laugh. She's like one of the loudest fighters you can watch fight. Every time I don't have to be looking at the TV, but I just know she's fighting. I just hear her little shouts every time she lands shots, and like every time she's doing that, she knows she's landing points, and she's most likely going to try to coast out to victory. I don't see her trying to engage in the grappling as much with Amanda Ribas due to Amanda Ribas having pretty dominant grappling skills.
Yeah, Jose, those are great points, and honestly, you almost made me laugh a little bit with the Chookagian. Definitely one of the louder fighters out there, and who's to say though? I mean, a lot of times, when I'm working out myself, and I do a little bit more exertion, heavier weights, kind of feels good to get out a little shriek sometimes. So I can't blame her for that, especially if it's helping her can land the shots that she needs to win these fights. So I'm really, like I said, I'm really excited to see this fight. But I was kind of looking at some of the statistical side of things here, which fascinated me because Chookagian really is phenomenal on her feet, and the reason she's been able to win so many decision fights is just because of her ability to land strikes and stay, top end conditioning and continue to push other fighters backwards. She's got a 4.59 strikes landed per minute, which is pretty incredible. But what was interesting to me is that Amanda Ribas has 4.65 significant strikes landed per minute. And I understand that she might have a couple inches height disadvantage, but the reach disadvantage is only 2 inches. I'm not quite convinced that that's going to be enough of a difference in this fight. Another pretty significant statistic in my eyes is Katlyn Chookagian's strikes absorbed per minute, which is actually 4.3, quite high but average for those fighters who like to stand up and brawl it out. You often see guys like Gaethje have a very high strikes landed and a very high strikes absorbed, which isn't to say that they necessarily are bad at avoiding strikes, but it's kind of their nature to just press forward and take more hits, which is okay. But Amanda Ribas has that high ability to land strikes. In fact, like I said, a higher strikes landed per minute average in her 6 UFC fights, and she's only absorbing 2.17 strikes per minute. So to me, she's just showing a little bit better of an ability to continue dominating standing up, but also avoid taking too much volume to her own body and take the fight to the ground if needed, with a 2 average takedowns per 15 minutes in her fights. So in the end, I'm actually going to be leaning on the underdog here. I really think she's going to give Chookagian a run for her money. And if this does go to decision, I think Chookagian will be lucky to get out with a split decision win at best. But in my opinion, Ribas is going to come out here and show the world that she's been working really hard. And I think she's going to get the win here as an underdog.
You heard it there, folks. Nick with Amanda Ribas, the underdog, and Jose with Chookagian, the favorite.
Yeah, and just a quick little extra note on there. I'm gonna take Rebus. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I'll put it out there. We're gonna go Rebus by knockout.
I love it. Ribas by knockout, or for me, Katlyn via decision. So, I love it. If the underdog gets the win, has to be almost the opposite method. I love it. And to be honest, there's truth to that. Yeah, I think if you're Amanda Ribas, I think the last thing you'd want to um be caught yourself in is a whole 3 rounds with Katlyn Chookagian. I think if you're Amanda Ribas, you can't rely on staying on the feet all 3 rounds, unless you're that confident in your striking. And I think only time will tell when we're actually watching the fight in real time.
All right, and we got the third fight on this UFC Vegas 54 card. Louis Smolka versus Dangerous Davey. I think this is going to be an interesting fight. I'm kind of a fan of Dangerous Davey. He's a fun guy to watch in the ring, and he's had some really exciting fights. Some of my favorite fights against Cheeto Vera, taking him to decision twice, and they're 1-1 against each other. I don't know. This is interesting. Definitely a good test for both sides here, because the Last Samurai they call Louis Smoka, and he's definitely a formidable opponent. Even though he's got the ability to take people down and wrestle with them, he also has a great striking ability and a high striking volume as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see Davey Grant handle the variety from Smoka in this fight.
Yes, Nick. Davey Grant will be looking to snap a 2-fight losing streak, as Luis Smolka is coming off a first round KO loss to Vince Morales. Uh, I think this is a fight that it is going to challenge both, but personally, I think I got Davey Grant in the bag for this one. Not to let his last 2 losses deter anyone, but Luis Smolka, he is the last samurai, but he's also not made it past the first round in many of his UFC bouts. And to me, that's kind of questionable. And has a win loss record. And a lot of his fights, win or loss, are like again, since they're within the first round, they've been coming pretty off spectacular. Like either he's getting KO'd in the first round, or he has his own TKO or submission in the first round. Davey Grant, he has KO power, and he also has shown that he can make it to decision. I think for this one, uh, I would have to go Davey Grant, and I seeing how the last 2 fights went to decision, I want to say Davey Grant does not want this fight to make it to the final 3 rounds.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jose. Especially with the conditioning level of Dangerous Davey, he's shown that he can keep up with some of the best. Adrian Yanez is a guy that may not be as well known, but that's a really tough opponent. And sure, he ended up losing that decision, but it was a split decision loss. Really, really close fight. So it's really tough to say. It is a loss, but it's tough to say that it really hurts him that much because he realizes that he was just on the edge, and I really think he's going to be able to take it to Smolka here. I think he's pretty live for a knockout because, like you said, there's really no way Davey's looking in there to take it to decision. And of course, I don't think any fighter is going in there thinking to take it to decision, but in this case, I think Davey's really going to be able to manhandle Smoko the way he wants. He's just got, like you said, the power on top of the volume with 4.55 strikes landed per minute. Davey's all over the place in the ring, and I've just been impressed to see him be able to hold his own against some of the high-end talent in the UFC. So another note too is that I feel like Smoka he kind of his stance. I was checking out some of his fights against Morales. Casey Kenny was an interesting one. He got submitted in the first round, so it wasn't very long. But his stance kind of almost like a Tony Ferguson kind of thing, where he kind of leaves space open right down the middle lane, and I just think Davey's gonna pop him with one. And that being said, like I said, KO Davey Grant, he's live for it. That's my pick.
Yeah, Nick, I like that pick a lot. Like we mentioned earlier, Louis Smolka has had a lot of first round losses, and a lot of it I think is attributed to he's kind of a slow starter, and because of that, like you said, I do think he's going to leave himself open, and someone like Davey Grant's going to take advantage of that right away, especially with his KO power and his submission skills as well, and knowing that Louis Smolka has been both submitted and knocked out within the first round. Um, To me, yeah, it's a no-brainer that you would have to go with Davey Grant. And, if you get a little risky, yeah, almost maybe Davey Grant specifically in the first round. Whether it's submission or KO, I don't know. I think that's whatever Luis Smolka leaves open to him. Not to bash and discredit Louis Smolka as well, but I do think that, like you mentioned, Davey Grant has kept up with higher UFC talent. Marlon Vera and Adrian Yanez, both tough tests. And yeah, like you mentioned, I've kept an eye on Adrian Yanez myself, and that is to go split decision with him is not a bad thing at all. And not to mention that he does have a win over Marlon Vera in the past. Granted that Marlon Vera is kind of finding his stride more now today. Still, he is 1-1 with Marlon Vera, and maybe with a win this Saturday, we can see a rematch in the future.
Yeah, I love it, Jose. And looking at the odds here, Davey Grant is without a doubt a favorite, minus 290. Louis Smoke was one of the bigger underdogs on this whole card, to be honest, plus 225. And I love the note you made. Even go as far as maybe looking at a round one knockout. It looks like you can get the over under 2.5 rounds. The under sitting at minus 164. So I think that's some pretty good money there to be able to say that the fight's going to end before the halfway point in that third round and or that second round, excuse me. And I just think that's pretty guaranteed. So that's going to be our final bets. Davey Grant by knockout and under 2.5 rounds.
All right, Nick, and that brings us over to the co-main event. It's a light heavyweight matchup. We got Ryan Spann versus Cutelaba. This match is one that was rescheduled. It was supposed to happen on February 26th, but Spann suffered an injury during his training camp and had to be rescheduled to this week's co-main event. Ian Cutelaba is coming off a win over Devin Clark in his most recent appearance. He has shown that he still has that fight in him in terms of he doesn't gas out. He's proven that he can keep sharp technique and keep pressing forward, and has really figured out how to get out of that notch coming off multiple losses to Magomed Ankalaev, while Spann looks to get back in the win column after he returns from a first-round submission loss from Anthony Smith this last September at UFC Fight Night 192.
Yeah, Jose, I'm really excited to see this fight. To be honest, we got two guys. That are honestly at the top of their division right now. Ryan Spann is a big dude, especially for a light heavyweight, 6'5", 81.5-inch reach, which is one thing that I was really looking at when thinking about this fight. Ion Cutelaba is not necessarily a small guy by any means, but 6'1" with 75-inch reach. Obviously, a 6.5-inch reach is quite significant, if you ask me. Excuse me, but in a case like this, Ryan Spann doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who can just knock out guys and use that reach advantage as much as he really should be. In multiple of his last couple fights, he's been either submitted via rear naked choke, or he took some elbows, hammer fists in round one against Johnny Walker and took that loss in 2020. So he's just proven to me that he isn't quite at the level of being able to use that long limb nature that he has and be superior standing. In the multitude of UFC wins that he has, 11 of them are actually by submission, which is by far the majority of his wins. And that being said, to me, Cutelaba will be able to defend those takedown attempts. He currently has a 79% takedown defense. I'm just looking at Ion being able to kind of fight this fight the way he wants. And like you said, just continue to press forward and do his thing in the octagon.
Cutelaba is a minus 215 favorite right now, while Ryan Spann is a plus 172 underdog. Historically, Ian Cutelaba has won fights that he's opened up as the betting favorite. The only one that he has not was to Khalil Roundtree, but he was the closing favorite, and we saw how that went. He got an impressive first round TKO with elbows against him back at UFC Fight Night 160. And Ryan Spann, me personally, he has some impressive wins when he first came into the UFC, but they all haven't really aged well. If you take a look back, his first two wins in his UFC career, those two guys are no longer in the UFC. Luis Enrique and Antonio Rogero Nogueira. Even though Antonio is a legend, still the fighter he fought today is not the same Antonio Rogero Nogueira that everyone knows and loves. The Devin Clark fight was all right, and the Sam Alvey fight. Sam Alvey, he's not been really good too as of lately. I think he's on a 7-fight losing streak, or 8-fight losing streak. I think just there's like a draw in there in the middle, and Ryan Spann just happened to catch him in the middle of that losing streak. So all those wins really don't say much to me. I do think he is unfortunately not really a top 10 guy. I think he's just someone that can hang in there with the UFC top guys, but not the top 10, unfortunately. He's going to be probably mostly someone that's going to be used in the future as an entryway to the top 10 for a lot of fighters. Ian Cutelaba, he's been in and out of the top 10 historically. He never really has broken in and found his niche, to say. He's gotten close, but he when it comes against big names too, he loses. But this is a fight that I think Ian Cutelaba should win. I don't really see any real threat coming from Ryan Spann. His last few fights, the ones that he's lost to first round KO, I mean, those are against Magomed. And that being said, I would see Ian Cutelaba winning this, and I can see him wanting to unleash that inner Hulk in him and trying to end it before the 3 rounds. I do see this most likely ending via TKO. He does have the gas tank, and he could push it out all 3 rounds, but the way he is, I don't see this fight making it to the end of the 3 rounds, so I would have to go with Ian Cutelaba TKO.
Yeah, honestly, and I was looking back at some of the previous fights from these guys, and I had taken an eye at Ryan Spann versus Johnny Walker. It was fascinating to watch. Ryan Spann got a couple really good knocks on Johnny and went to go take him down on the ground, and Johnny was able to get the reversal, and they kind of scrambled for a little bit and ended up to the point where Johnny was up against the fence and Spann was leaning up against him, but Johnny was wailing at him with the elbows, and that just kind of showed to me that Spann, you know, he isn't the greatest in the grappling situations. And if I'm Spann, I'm gonna be training with some of the best boxing coaches around to try and utilize that crazy reach ability. But I'm just not seeing that. Cutelaba has pretty impressive striking volume with 4.91 significant strikes landed per minute in his UFC fights. He's honestly impressive in that, right? Even Ryan Spann has 3.43 strikes landed per minute. So when we're looking at some of the raw numbers here, they still seem to favor Cutelaba standing as well as ability to defend takedowns. So I agree with you in the end, Jose. I think Cutelaba is going to win this fight. I'm not sure I'm confident enough to say that he will outright knock out Spann. I think it's a really good chance that he knocks out Spann. He's been knocked out before. I also wouldn't be surprised if it went to decision. So personally, I would just endorse the Cutelaba money line. But as Jose mentioned, Cutelaba is a relatively heavy favorite at minus 215. So, you know, it may not be the investment that wins you the most, but it's a pretty safe bet. Definitely Ian Cutelaba on that pick, though.
That being said, we're going to open this up discussing Jan versus Rakic, and I really think this is an interesting fight, Jose. Rakic is coming in at a minus 200 favorite against the underdog plus 160, which is fascinating. I mean, a couple of years ago, Jan was at the top of his career, having beaten Dominic Reyes and defending his title against Izzy coming up from middleweight. And he takes that rear naked choke loss to Glover, and he's finding himself as an underdog on the main card of a fight night. So this is really interesting, Jose.
Yes, like yourself, I was surprised to see the former champ be the underdog in this case. Rakic, he's a crazy animal though, man. This guy really caught my attention when he did that head kick to Jimmy Manuel, and man, unfortunately, he's not as active as I'd like to see him be compared to John. John has been a little more active in the light heavyweight division, and that's why he had that quick rise to be champion. And he both have shown great power, knockout power, and this is one for the ages, Nick. I think this one is really going to be one of John's biggest tests, and if Rakic can make past him, we are looking at a definite title contender right here.
Yeah, Jose, those are great points. I was looking in because I had only seen Rakic from his last couple fights against Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos. I wasn't quite in as early as you were with that kick knockout against Manuel, but regardless, this is a big man at 6'4". He's got a 78-inch reach. He could easily fill out to be a heavyweight, and he's keeping his body in a great shape. And making light heavyweight, and I think he's going to continue to whip up his opponents. He's taken Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith, to decision, and Thiago Santos is a guy that Jan wasn't able to beat. Granted, that was also a close fight, but in the end, Jan got knocked out at the end of that third round, and that was history. So, in my opinion, this is interesting. I do understand why Rakic could be the favorite when you look at some of the statistics here. He has shown himself against some of the higher talent in the UFC, and I would fully expect Jan's hands to be full for this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be John's biggest test. The only thing is, I definitely see John has definitely been tested in the deep waters more than Alexander Rakic. I mean, for example, John went 5 rounds with Israel Adesanya. In John is pretty well experienced where he can come in with a well game plan. He doesn't need to knock him out if he knows it's not going to be there, and he's not going to try to force any submissions. He's definitely going to be well composed and stay technical and not get too loose. Not much that's been threatened on the ground by Alexander Rakic in terms of not many submissions. He's definitely a guy that is looking for a finish, but he has proven he can go to decision. 3 rounds, that is, as he did against, like you mentioned, Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos. That being said, John, he's been tested in the waters and he's put people out. He's knocked out Corey Anderson in the first round. He knocked out the former middleweight champ Luke Rockhold in the second round. And not to mention, he himself has also got numerous wins over other big names like Jared Cannonier and Jimmy Manuel and Dominic Reyes. TKO Dominic Reyes, second round, by the way. So, yes, this is going to be power versus power, but when it comes to fight IQ, I think John has the slight edge. I just don't think Alexander Rakic has been as active as I mentioned earlier. I mean, he's fought only twice in the last 2 years. And then before that, he had a loss to Volkan Ozdemir. And yes, Volkan Ozdemir is a former title challenger. That's a fight he shouldn't have lost. Granted, it was split decision. That just shows me that if Rakic lets it get to the judge's decision, it may not always go his way. And I believe John is smart enough to keep an edge and at least be winning by points if he can't finish him.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Polish power, without a doubt, concerns me. Anytime he's in the ring, he has the ability to pretty much put anyone lights out in one punch. So that's always something you have to consider if you're going to be going against Jan. But in this case, I've seen some footage on his fight against Thiago Santos, and I was impressed enough with his ability to stand up and brawl that one out. It did seem like one of his weaknesses was kind of in the kicking department. Thiago was throwing a lot of body kicks, a lot of kicks to his front leg, because it looked like Rakic kind of leaned and left his front leg pretty far out there. So it'd be interesting to me. I think that's one thing. If I was Jan, I'd be targeting and I'd be trying to kick that leg and kick his body a whole bunch, because it clearly made an impact on that fight. But in the end, Rakic was able to dig deep and grind that one out. And that's kind of the same thing I think I see happening here. By no means do I think Rakic is going to have a chance at knocking out Jan or necessarily submitting him either. But I do think he's going to be able to stand toe to toe with Jan and avoid those big Polish power swings and just kind of ease his way into a decision win here. So my pick will be Rakic by decision.
I like that, Nick. And that's pretty much sums up what my pick is. But for the opposite end is Jan Blachowicz. It seems like I truly think that his experience and knowledge is what's gonna win him that edge. I think that former champ mentality is there, and I just think it's gonna be the biggest test for both guys in a minute. But I don't think this is gonna be John's biggest test of his career, but I do think this is Alexander Rakic's biggest test of his career. So that being said, I am gonna go with John uh, winning via unanimous decision.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that's a fair pick for both sides, and without a doubt, maybe not the biggest test of Jan's career, but definitely one of the bigger, more important fights of his career, considering he's coming off of that contention. He was trying to withhold that belt and lost, got choked out by a pretty old guy. So this is important for Jan to come bounce back and get that win to keep his respect in the UFC. Obviously, the biggest match for Rakic's career by far as well. So I'm excited.
All right, folks, that brings me to my favorite section of each week's show, the betting section. We have got plenty of bets for you to win money on these fights, and that's what we're here for, to have some fun and watch people beat each other up and win some money while we're doing it. That being said, I'm going to throw some heaters your guys' way to win some money here. Don't forget to follow us at Twitter and subscribe on YouTube, Moneyline MMA. We have a great record. We're currently 4-1 on our best bets, so you're going to want to keep listening and winning money with us. I can assure you that. So starting off here, our first bet of the week is going to be Davey Grant by KO. Um, right now, I'm not able to find him specifically by KO. He's a minus 290 favorite, so great parlay piece. It's a little tough to bet him straight up on the money line. Next bet of the week, we're going to go Torres by KO. El Luco, the crazy one, is minus 122 to win. It sure is going to be a tough fight, but I think he comes out dominant, and that is worth a bet on its own. Personally, I know Jose dissented on the Chookagian side, but I'm going to say Ribas comes in, puts the pounds on, and puts the pressure on Chookagian and gets her decision win. You'll find that at plus 132. And our final of these bets is going to be Rakic by decision. Another one that Jose dissents against with Blachowicz. But regardless, you can find Rakic by decision plus 195. This is going to be a tough one as it's 5 rounds. So both these men are going to be tested, and if it does get to decision, some chins are going to be strong. But regardless, I think that's a really good value. And that being said, our underdogs of the week. I know you guys won't be surprised to hear that Ribas is my underdog of the week. I'm definitely excited to see what she can do going up 10 pounds and taking on one of the more legends in the female fighting world. And I know Jose has stated his underdog of the week is Jan, and I'm excited to see that fight just as much as he is. So either way, I won't be surprised if the Polish Power can get that knockout on Rakic and move forward in his light heavyweight career. Either way, our podcast show, Best Pick, Jose endorsed as well with Ion Cutelaba. That is the one fight that you can be guaranteed to bet on that will win, regardless. That being said, I want to end with the parlays. And this is my personal interest. I love making parlays. I think it's a great way to put a couple dollars down and win some good money. And that being said, we're going to start with the low risk parlay. It's a three-way with one guy that is on the prelim card, but you can be rest assured that he's going to win the fight. He's a prospect coming out of Japan. He's Japan's best flyweight fighter, and he's fighting Carlos Candelario. His name is Tetsuro Taira, and he is 10-0 in his career. He'll easily come in here and take out 8-1 Chris Carlos Candelario. So add him on the parlay, add Davey Grant in there, and add Ion Cutelaba, our best bet, and you're going to get a plus 172 parlay. It's a very safe bet with great return. Medium medium risk, we're going to add in a leg to add to each tier here. So we're sticking with Tyra, we're sticking with Davey Grant and Cutelaba. We're going to add in Hadley. Uh, we've had some agreements in Hadley being able to come in against Nascimento. And even though it's his UFC specific debut, I think he's going to be able to dominate. And adding him in the parlay will get you at plus 299, which to me is extremely good value for some wins that should happen. And the high risk, if you're really looking to win it all, we're going to go add to the one extra leg. We're going to add to that Amanda Ribas. And if you do that and get the 5-leg win, you'll get plus 907 odds. And I think that has, again, great value. So I'm excited to see these fights happen. And that's personally some of the parlays I'm looking at putting my money on. And as I've explained, we've got a great record here at Moneyline MMA. So don't forget to follow us on Twitter and on YouTube, Moneyline MMA. We're going to be continuing to put out weekly shows on Wednesday, and you can look forward to continuing to win money with this show. So thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you next week.